also directed the town solicitor and town engineer to act in accordance with discussion held in executive session regarding general auto. I'd like a motion to seal the minutes, please.
Make a motion to seal the minutes.
Second.
Motion's been mailed and second. All those in favor? Like a motion according to what I just said.
Second.
Motion been made and second. All those in favor? Thank you, everyone. Solar energy development presentations. Memorandum of Mark Russo, Town Planner. Energy Development Partners presentation. Mark, would you like to start?
Sure. We've had a couple of companies interested in developing solar industrial parks, as you see from the memorandum. We thought it'd be prudent to bring them in to make a presentation to the council, to understand in general what the presentation and the development is all about, why it might make some sense for the town. Renewable energy is allowed in the planned development park, floating overlay zoning district. The upside is, the potential here is for a ground lease, for some of the land to be leased for the solar development. And you've got a potential pilot agreement with some taxes, and also energy savings for the community. There's different ways to approach this. I'd like you to listen to what they have to say and make a determination if they want us to pursue it even further.
Energy Development Partners, are they here? Come on up. That's fine. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Justin Moran.
Hi.
Good evening, I'm Russ Maiman, Project Development Director for Energy Development Partners. I'd like to thank the council for inviting us here tonight. We're very excited to work with you on the prospect of solar energy in your industrial park. We came here tonight at Mark's suggestion. He told us it would be sort of a working meeting, so we are open to making a quick presentation of our thoughts and then hearing any questions that you might have and answering any questions.
Okay.
Okay? So Energy Development Partners, our company, real quick, we are a local Rhode Island developer of energy, renewable energy, primarily solar. We have two managing partners who have over 30 years of experience. The company has over 50 years combined experience in energy development. We have several projects located in Rhode Island that are operating, a 2-megawatt project in West Greenwich, a 1.25 megawatt project in Johnston, 500 kW project in North Kingston, and another 500 kW project in Middletown, Rhode Island. We have numerous other projects in the works, which I won't go into deep details on, but we are very experienced at developing these projects in Rhode Island. I know Mark had said this is a working group meeting, which meant that there might be some questions and some concerns as to how this all happens. And so I'll just go through a few solar concepts real quick so everyone's on the same page. So one of the concepts in solar energy, which has really been a significant development in creating the remarkable growth that solar has seen in the last 10 years, is a phenomenon known as net metering. And net metering is a concept where, let's take an example. You have a school here in town, middle school, elementary school, and they have an existing load. They have a meter which measures their electricity usage. When you do a net metering project, typically the solar is installed on the roof or on the ground, and it is wired behind the meter, okay? So it is directly wired into the control panel of the school or where the load is. If it's a bright sunny day and the school is using power, it'll draw the power from the solar panels first. If it needs more power, it continues to draw from the utility, okay? If it's a bright sunny Sunday and no one's in school and there's not much of a load, not much of a requirement for power, but those panels are still producing power, they'll flow back out through the meter and back up onto the utility lines and spin the meter backwards. And that's called net metering, okay? At the end of the month, you just true up with the utility, you slow down your meter, okay? and everyone saves money, okay? Another big driver in the solar industry has been some tax credits. Municipalities cannot take advantage of these tax credits, so it's difficult for them to do these net metered projects, okay? So what the state of Rhode Island and some other states have realized is it makes sense for municipalities to do something which is called virtual net metering. In virtual net metering, the solar power is located somewhere other than at the school. In other words, you take the high school, the elementary school, all the town buildings, combine their load requirements, and build an array somewhere else. Okay? That array produces power, there's a meter there, power goes up onto the lines. That meter gets associated through a monetary credit with all of the town's bills. So that is one way that the town can benefit, okay? In Rhode Island, it's a little unique. Rhode Island law is allowing these projects to be put anywhere in Rhode Island. So your town's virtual net metering project doesn't have to be in the town of Tiverton. As long as you have a site, a sublease, site control of the site, you can take advantage of those net metering laws. So I'm getting a little long-winded here, but that's kind of framing why we're here. We lease property, or set up the lease, to do these virtual net metering projects. So there's three ways in which the town can benefit, okay? They can benefit through leasing the land. They can also participate in this net metering arrangement as the off-taker for the power. You enter into a 20 or 25-year power purchase agreement, and you get a discounted rate on your power to what the grid charges you. And thirdly, there is a payment in lieu of taxes arrangement that would provide additional revenues. So again, I didn't want to get too long-winded. We have presented Mark a proposal, and we are interested in discussing the potential for a lease of one or several lots in your industrial park. And again, I know it gets a little confusing, so I would love to open it up to any questions that might have come up just from that brief discussion.
I'm looking at the Herald News, and I just want to make sure I have the right numbers. It indicated, and I'm quoting, for the lease, the company would pay $156,000 per year for 30 acres, $281,000 a year for 60 acres, $375,000 a year for 90 acres. I guess, first of all, have I read that correctly in terms of the lease?
That is correct, lease.
Okay. Now, is there anything in addition to that other than the net metering that you referred to?
I don't understand the question.
Well, is there any other, is there any other benefit to the town? I just want to
Okay,
make sure
yeah.
I have a complete understanding of what the town gets.
Yeah, so the town would then also earn a tax payment as well, which would be through through a pilot
okay.
agreement. Right.
Okay,
Pilot agreement.
okay.
And then again, if the town wanted to benefit from that power, you could enter into a PPA as well. I don't know what the town's electrical load looks like.
What's a PPA?
I'm sorry, power purchase agreement.
So you would be producing other power which you're going to be selling?
Right, right. So when I lease this land from you and put a solar array up there,
Right.
I'm not sure where that power's going to go.
It could come to us, or
It could, yes, yep, yep.
So do we get any benefit from you selling the power to other,
You get the lease payment, yeah.
the lease payment?
So,
And then
And
the
the
lieu
pilot.
of tax benefit, too. right?
payment in lieu of taxes, right,
In lieu of taxes.
right.
Good, yeah.
Is the cost of electricity more expensive, or I'm a little lost on that?
Yeah, so power purchase agreements can be structured in one of two ways. You can enter into an actual stated number for the kilowatt hours, and that would be obviously something less than what National Grid would be charging you. So you'd be getting some sort of savings. Or you could work it in what's called a net metering arrangement, where it's a percentage off of the net metering credit. So that off-site power, the way they value it, there's four main ingredients that they total up: the supply, the transmission, the transition, and the delivery. It's those,
Could you repeat those again?
yeah, supply, transition, transmission, and delivery. If you look at your home electric bill, you'll see those phrases on your electric bill. They look very small because they're .0002 something, but when you multiply them out by the kilowatts, they add up.
So that, I'm also looking at EDP would sell Tiverton net metering credit currently worth .1701 at .125, so it'd be a 26%, 0.45% savings or a 26% discount.
Yeah, just to be in full disclosure, that number has changed. It's no longer .17, it's closer to .1412, I believe.
So it's come down.
The net metering rate has come down, right? Again, thinking of the four components that make it up, supply has come down recently.
Okay. But those other two numbers would stay, the other numbers would stay the same, or would that come down with it?
The 12.5?
Yes.
No, the rate that you sign up for the PPA is usually stated on the first year, and then it rises.
2%.
Yeah, by some sort of escalator, exactly.
Okay.
I have another question.
Sure.
We have a landfill committee here in town, and I'm on that landfill committee. Do you know anything about Tiverton?
Lived around my whole life. I know it's a
Okay.
beautiful place to live. How's
Okay.
that?
Okay, we have a landfill that we're trying to close.
Okay,
And we will be closing it within the next 3 years or so.
great.
I've tried to interest somebody into the concept of solar energy in an old landfill. Has Mark discussed that at all with you? No, okay. Is that out of the question already before we even get to it, or? No. Okay.
I wouldn't say it's out of the question, but, you know, in typically, a landfill has to be closed for a number of years to let the ground settle before you...
That's what I keep hearing.
Right,
yeah.
right. So it's a great idea, and there's solar on landfills all over the country, and it's a fabulous use for it, because it's otherwise not going to have any other use, so it does happen.
I've gotten that same answer from a number of people, but typically, how many years do you have to let it just sit there?
It's hard to say, it depends on what's in the landfill, but 2 to 2 on average, 1, 2, 3 in that range.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Most of your settling is going to occur in the first 5 years after closure. Is what we heard the engineer tell us at the landfill committee the other night.
Yeah, that's right. You missed the meeting, Jay.
Russ, but we're pretty far from the grid at our landfill.
Right.
Pretty far south. And is there a cost to build out that connection from the array to?
When you say it's far from the grid, is there power near the landfill at all?
Oh, sure, there's a cell tower there, so pretty significant power.
You need three-phase power. If there's three-phase power close by, it can usually be done.
Now, how many
The
acres?
number of panels.
I don't think
Yeah,
it's
that was going to be
three-phase
my,
anyway.
Denise, can I just
Sure.
finish on that? So I noticed when I read from the Herald News here, what did you have, 30 acres, 60 acres, and 90? I believe, Mark, and correct me if I'm wrong, the landfill is 35 acres that we're going to cover? Oh, okay.
That's
then
approximately.
I won't, yeah. Okay.
So,
So 35 acres would be something that you could possibly
Yeah.
work with in the future.
If those 35 acres were all usable, right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Typically on landfills, when they cap them, there's a grade to them,
Right.
and it's typically the top of the landfill, a flat portion. Again, you can't penetrate into a landfill.
Okay.
You have to do what's called ballast. You have to use some sort of ballast material to keep the panels in place. You can't get on too steep a slope with that, so it's typically the top of the landfill that gets the solar array.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to have a site visit at one of your other sites?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. We've done that before. I've done that with the Exeter Town Council down in West Greenwich.
If I may, I also had a question for Mark. At least the way the Herald News wrote up the proposal, it was a proposal for 30 acres, 60 acres, and 90 acres.
Yes.
Do we have any idea in terms of what might be an appropriate size? That is, I don't want to, I think you can tell where I'm going. I don't want to give away 90 acres because I'm not sure enough is left after that for any other project. On the other hand, I can see a 30 and a 60 acre proposal.
Right.
Okay.
That's my thought processes, is 25 to 35 acres, a max, a percentage of the industrial park being part of the energy park.
Right.
And I just identified on that plan right there, the open space and some of the areas that are ledge and rock outcroppings. There's about 40 acres there in that green area, and leave the prime land alone. Because if you get into the analysis here, the numbers for, say, a ground lease, they're marginal compared to what you get for highest and best use of some other uses in the park. But if you generate a revenue stream to perhaps use that revenue stream to do sewerage or build up the rest of the park and get the value of that land up higher and more developable, then it makes sense to make this part of an energy park scheme.
So where the green areas are,
That's open space and the ledge.
You can develop on open space.
Well, I believe that's what I'm going to look into that, because let's look back at
TWA wanted to.
our
I'm just asking.
a long proposal. For example, we're using the open space. There was no open space maintenance agreement or any deed restrictions on that open space. This has to be looked at. If that's a possibility, then that's where I recommend it would go.
So where would this be on that map?
show us.
All
What- All the green area.
Open space, open space, open space.
Now, where's the long project on? For some reason, okay.
Okay.
That's Main Road.
And that's
Okay,
the
I
other
get it
piece
now.
in the police station up top to the left.
Okay.
So just a portion of the park, generating some income stream, that's all, not the whole park.
And altogether, how many acres is all the green?
20, 12, 32, 4, 48.
48 acres right there.
Okay.
And if I, Mark, can I interject?
Sure.
I was speaking to Mark earlier, so 30 acres is a good number as well. You know, there's rules and regulations that have been set forth for interconnecting these projects into national grid. One of them here in Rhode Island is a 5-megawatt AC cap. In other words, you can't do a project larger than that per site. Just working the numbers, rough numbers, 1 megawatt would sit on about 4 to 5 acres of property. So if you just do the math forward, a 5-megawatt site would sit on approximately 25 to 30 acres. So it'd be a good lot for a solar development. Our proposal went above that because we would be interested in several lots if you would make them available.
Would this be the largest acreage you would have for solar?
No, we have others in the state that are larger.
Which ones do you have that are larger?
Well, they're being developed right now.
So that would be Exeter,
No, they're not built yet. They're in development, in the pipeline.
oh, okay.
Yep.
Madam
We
President-
actually, we
Madam
have
President, can I have the
several.
floor, please?
Sure.
Middletown, is that where I see what you guys built, is that the industrial park?
I believe it is, yeah.
All right, I
Yeah.
noticed what they did there was they used all the unbuildable property, because they went in the buffer zone between the residential and the back behind what, Tech 3 or whatever it is.
Okay.
So, and that kind of impressed me, because they used land that couldn't be developed.
Best
Yet
place to put it.
wasn't- Yet it didn't impact on the residential
Right.
behind it, so it was a smart move for Middletown. I'd be interested in the arrangement that you have with Middletown. I think they're a similar-sized municipality, and
Yep.
that's kind of where I go in our park, is because we had a proposal, if you remember, it was the Tiverton Water Authority actually owns property right down behind the park. It's a buffer zone for the Stafford Pond. And they had talked about putting, I guess, windmills, but, well, wind generators rather, but turbines. But solar panels, I think, are, can go just about anywhere, I believe. It's,
Grade and location to the.
well, I mean,
to the
as far
power.
as this being, like, it's not going to present a hazard to the drinking water in that area.
Right, right.
So there are lands adjoining our park, the Tiverton Water Authority, who could certainly use revenue too, so
We'd be willing to take a look at it.
yeah, but, all right.
And
So
and just in full disclosure, that Middletown project.
Yeah.
So there's another program in Rhode Island known as the Renewable Energy Growth Program. It's a different type of program. It's not that net metering that I explained. In that program, you actually put a solar array up anywhere, and you just wire right up onto the utility, and you get paid directly for that power. That's one of those arrangements. So Middletown doesn't benefit from that power.
Okay.
They're just getting a lease for the land.
Well, it's land that couldn't be used.
Yeah, yeah,
and that-
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
was
I just
my
wanted to make
point,
sure you understood
because
what I'm
I
bringing
think
with
that
Middletown.
we don't want to take away from the park the developable land. I think we're hoping that more is going to come into that park.
Yep.
And, all right, the pilot program, can you describe, just basically what that, I understand it's payment in lieu of taxes.
Right.
But comes from the state legislature? This is something that was put in legislation?
Yeah, so it's a little tricky right now, so, because there's legislation in place being voted on right now that's trying to stabilize that rate. If that wasn't there, typically we go to the town and negotiate some sort of rate on the real estate and property taxes. And it has to be stabilized because these solar parks, they earn a revenue, which is selling the power, and that's it. It doesn't go up, down, it's pretty stated, they know what it is for the life of the project. And the way these projects get financed is a finance company comes in and provides that finance knowing what the revenue source is, so we have to know what all the expenses are throughout the life of the project, so we have to stabilize the taxes.
So the town would not be taxing the panels at their value. The pilot would take the place of the local property.
Exactly. You take the real estate taxes and the property, combine them into some agreeable amount. Again, a solar array doesn't put any strain on the town's resources, you know. There's no,
Would you, let's say, do you have to have, would you have to have all of the panels in one area? Let's say we had an area on the backside of our parks that's next to power. Could your company actually spread these panels around town in open space and areas around town?
Yes and no. Again, getting back to my initial discussion of aggregating all of the in one spot, you keep the
Yeah.
cost lower, you know?
Yeah.
If we were to come in and put solar panels on each one of the schools and buildings, it'd be a lot of cost. It'd be too costly to give you a really
So, yeah, just-
rate.
So it's not efficient.
Yeah. When you break them up with space like that too, now you've got a separate array, you know?
All right.
You'll see some large arrays that might have a little space between them and they're wired together. Once you separate them and they're not wired together, they're different arrays.
You said Middletown was
500 kW,
KW,
it's 500,000 watts.
so. And how many acres do you remember? You
Probably in
said-
the 2.5 acre range.
So that's not a lot of, all right, so the part, what you're proposing, what type of infrastructure, are you talking running new high-tension wires through the park?
So I haven't, excuse me, I'm fairly new with Energy Development
Yeah.
Partners. I haven't been out to the site yet. I understand there's three-phase power in there already. Yeah.
Connected to the power plant?
We just need to get up on the
That's
wires.
existing.
You don't
Yeah.
actually need to run lines directly to a substation for these type of connections. If you look up on the top of a pole and you see the spreader across with the three lines, that usually means there's three-phase in there, and as long as we have access to three-phase power, we can connect.
It doesn't matter the size of the wire. I'm used to seeing usually cable.
Yeah, no, this isn't large distribution type stuff. No, just as long as there's three-phase power out there.
Really?
Yeah.
So the wires that run along the top of the telephone poles, you can hook up that large of a
Yeah.
megawatt?
Yep. Oh, yeah, up to 5 megawatts.
Wow.
And again, you know, so our proposal was based on a rate, again, that would require some more due diligence. You know, you have to look at what the ground looks like, you know, have to see what you're getting into one of the parts of the project that we have to do up front, which is looking at the lines and what's on the lines. We have to do a report with National Grid to find out what's available. If there's other generation on the line already, if there was a solar park or a wind farm down the street,
Yeah.
the transmission and substation for that area might not be able to handle another generation project.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
The hookup that he was talking about, what was it called, was it renewable hookup that was going straight to the line?
Renewable Energy Growth Program. So there's basically two programs in Rhode Island. The Renewable Energy Growth Program, which is designed to incentivize developers to put solar throughout Rhode Island, distributed generation, and just put it up on the lines, and the grid pays you a rate which is agreed to by the PUC. The other one is net metering, where it's near the load.
Then I'm gonna be really ignorant. 5 megawatts, how much electricity is that? So
Yes, that's 5 million watts. So,
still is-
How many
don't
homes?
know
yeah,
about that. How much-
I'll do some math real quick. So, it's about 540 homes. Average home uses about 10 to 12,000 kilowatt hours annually.
unless it's Al Gore's home. Remember that? Sorry, I could be there.
Any other questions? Brad?
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for coming. You mentioned that you had submitted a proposal to Mark, and I'm just wondering if that's, we've got some slides here. Is that essentially what we're talking about, or is there a formal proposal?
The PowerPoint.
Just the PowerPoint is what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So you answered one of my questions, which was, have you been out to the site yet? The topography of the industrial park is its best asset. That's right. Gary's laughing. So it does have a pretty extreme topography. I don't know if you've seen a topo or either one of you have been out to the site, but.
I've been out there, but definitely didn't study it in great detail.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking about, you're talking about the slope of, or the grade that these things are on. I just want to understand what the limitations are, because if there are areas that are unusable, how that impacts your 5 megawatt goal.
Yeah, it's hard to describe it and give you exact specifics, but obviously, we're working with several farmers in the state who have unused farmland. It's perfect. It's cleared already. It's flat, typically a nice, even slope. When you start getting into steep areas, I'm in the solar industry. People show me pictures of wild installations all the time, Those typically carry a higher cost.
Yeah.
It's just fact of life, The more difficult something is to do, the more costly it is. So you typically don't see, slopes or rocky areas or things of that nature, which is just going to drive up the site cost.
Okay.
So, when you can get a flat, fairly gentle grade, pitching to the south, home run, But when it gets
Well, we've got pitching
steep-
to the south. But
We have a lot of,
it's a pretty rocky terrain.
And I fully understand that this is an industrial park that,
Yeah.
you might want to increase revenues by leasing it to others as well, so we get that, totally.
What presumably there needs to be some cutting of trees, one would imagine, because shade doesn't make for good solar
Right.
parks.
Right.
What is it, if you have site control over, say, a certain amount of acreage, how do you balance that with abutting users who might have very tall trees that are going to cast a shadow?
Yeah, we trim trees when we have to.
Okay.
We have to stay away from wetlands, obviously. We try to keep the run from the three-phase power as short as possible. I think everyone knows the further you get away from, electrical generator, you lose efficiency. The same thing happens in the solar industry. So we try to shorten that run, stay close to the poles, stay away from wetlands and other, environmentally sensitive areas, and stay away from boundaries. And these things are usually spelled out in zoning setbacks.
What's the timeline look like? What's the timeline look
Yeah,
like
so
for you
real
guys?
rough,
Project timeline?
18 to 24 months, and that's full timeline, The actual construction doesn't take long at all. It's mostly the permitting and zoning and all that, yeah. Working through the lease, the power purchase agreement, all of those things take 6 to 9 months, and then getting the site ready, interconnection studies with National Grid.
Yeah. What is the volatility of, pricing and programs, credit programs? I mean, if we're talking about 18 to 24 months, and that's the best we can do today, we're actually probably talking about, 24 to 36 months if,
Right.
we leave ourselves some time and we make decisions in a, typically governmental way.
Right.
What what risks are there associated? Because I know that I imagine credits expire and programs turn over.
Yep, exactly. So the net metering laws in Rhode Island are favorable right now. I'm not sure what the net metering laws will be next year or the year after. The investment tax credit has been extended for 3 years, so that's a good thing. I'm not sure if you heard that in the news, but there's a 30% federal tax credit, which, the finance company will take advantage of, but you'll see that in a lower rate. That is in place for 3 years, and actually it's in place for 5 years. It reduces the last 2 years of those 5. There's talk of pilot stabilization. There's other things that could happen that could, make the situation a little different. incentives throughout the country have been put in place, and they're typically on a declining basis. You know, our neighbors to the north, Massachusetts, put in, I don't want to get too deep into the technical aspects, but they put in a program where you got paid an additional incentive, and that went from very high numbers, almost 50 cents a watt in the beginning of the program, and has dropped down to under 20 cents a watt. So that's how the incentive programs are based. You know, they're the first in get the biggest benefit, and then once we get to scale, supply and other numbers come down, and the incentives come down as well. I started in solar in 2009, and it was over $5 a watt to install a system. We're under $2 now, so.
I mean, on a cost basis.
Yeah, right. Just to give you an idea of how the cost have come down.
What does that lease structure look like typically from, I mean, you're going to propose a lease to us, I presume, because you've got a format that you like to use, but what do those 18 to 24 months look like? Do you have a trigger date? Do you have a threshold? Do you pay a certain percentage and then you can walk away if you don't get your favorable financing? Or
Yeah, we do like a year lease option when we go through all of our due diligence. Absolutely, we pay for that lease option. And then once we get through the interconnection process with National Grid and secure the PPA, then we'll go to the full contract, absolutely.
There's a mention of a 1.5% pricing index. Is that an index or is that just a 1.5% escalator?
Yeah, that's an escalator.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's what you propose, but is that are the terms of the lease at all negotiable, or is this how it is?
Yeah, so they would be negotiable. Again, we have to go out and do our due diligence on the site. I believe in the first example, it came out to $25,000 per megawatt, and that's at the upper end of leases in the state of Rhode Island. They run between $15,000 and $25,000 per megawatt.
And it's a 25-year base lease with 5-year options?
Yep.
What is the life expectancy of these units?
Yeah, so the panels are warranted from a performance standpoint for 25 years, but they'll last much longer than that, honestly.
If they have a declining efficiency after that?
Yes, well, the efficiency declines in the first 10 years, and they typically settle in around 85% of their production output, and they tend to stay right in that 80 to 85% range.
Okay.
But they do. The first few years, they'll drop about 0.5% per year on average.
Okay.
But that's something, excuse me, that's something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah,
That's
I
all
mean, you
factored
build that
the
into your
PPA.
model,
Right,
I'm sure,
right.
yeah. And then, say 25 years comes and goes, and you guys decide to get out of the business of, or your assignee gets out of the business of solar energy. Does the lease typically allow for a reversion back to the original state of the land, or do you just say, your solar panels now, see ya?
Yes.
Okay.
You could have the solar panels, have the array, it continues to make power, it could become part of the town. I've seen leases work that way, or you could put in a bond, a decommissioning bond to take the array down. We'll work with you whatever way you want it structured.
Okay. But is one of those options, I mean, those two options seem like the impetus is on the town, but is there an option to, at the commencement of the lease, to remove the array and return the site to as it was?
That could be worked in.
Okay. Great, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think the question is really directed to Mark. In view of the proposal, which is broken down into a proposal for 30 acres, 60 and 90 acres, have they been introduced to the Water Authority people?
No.
Because they were, I guess the word bugging wouldn't be the right word, but they've raised this issue of wind turbines a number of times with us.
They have.
If you're interested in a wind turbine, I would assume you'd have some interest in a solar, so I'd at least touch base with them
Okay.
and see what
A lot of
they...
land around the pond, so I was
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
impact.
Yeah, but it's not as though they're planning to develop that land for anything,
No.
so if they're willing to put a turbine on it, I would think they'd be willing to put a solar panel, but
But this gets back to the use of the power. If they're interested in discount electricity, they could be a potential off-taker from the power.
From
Yeah,
the industrial.
right. In Rhode Island, just to get back to those net metering laws for municipalities, you don't have to take it on yourself as a single municipality. You can join forces with Little Compton, your water authority, whoever else, and form a consortium, increase your buying power of up to 4 or 5 megawatts and make a better deal. That's what South Kingston and Narragansett and URI did.
One more, please. What about energy storage? We had some facilities that talked about, is there any plan?
Yeah, so energy storage is gaining great momentum in the industry, but it's just where we are here in the municipality, it's still too expensive.
Yeah.
But it is gaining popularity, and it's definitely the wave of the future. But for these programs, it would price you out of a cost savings.
We had one that actually was talking about doing algae ponds to create, I guess, the natural gas to run a jet turbine.
Yeah, yeah. There's a whole study of that up in
Yeah.
MIT. is
And
working
again,
on
I
it.
think most of it was like,
Anyone else?
Madam President, just one question.
Sure.
Yeah, I know you said you're new, Russ, to EDP, so
Right.
if you don't know, then you don't know, it's fine. Are you familiar with the Middletown transaction and why they structured it the way they did?
So the Middletown was just nothing more than a land lease.
Yeah, so Sean's a pretty smart cookie, so I'm wondering why he did that. Is it because the net metering didn't pan out for the town of Middletown, or was it because he wanted them to up your lease?
So I'm not sure exactly when that array was installed, but these net metering arrangements with the with municipalities are fairly new to Rhode Island.
Okay.
They're only now starting to get installed.
had to be 2 years ago, at least. I was working on it.
The Renewable Energy Growth Program that I referenced is in its second year. It came out last year, 2015. It's got 5-year life. Before that was its predecessor, which was the DG program, and that's what this award was part of, actually, which came out in 2011.
Anyone else?
Just one question, again, on the net metering. Are there any in the pipeline with any of the towns that are taking advantage of net metering?
So we've been awarded net metering arrangements from Central Falls, North Smithfield, URI. I think that's it. We have others in the works, but those are the ones that we actually have arrangements with.
Any of those,
Oh, and again, Quonset Development Corporation.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Any of those communities participate in the REAP? So do they have a relationship with Direct Energy to buy power supply?
Oh, yeah.
So what was the blowback there? Because our power supply is at 9.6 cents.
Right.
Which you can't touch with the net metering calculated price. So how did they exit
But that's just your supply, isn't it?
just as a supply?
Yeah.
So you're all in with your...
Right,
1.14
12 and a half, I think, was in the,
12.5.
yeah. Which would be less than what your total rate would be. But you have to wait for that contract to be over. I don't know how long your contract runs through, do you know? 2 more years? Yeah. Sometimes you can get out of those. Like anything else.
Get out of any contract if you want to pay it.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
I want to thank the council very much for having us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I again would like to tour, if you can set something up with Mark.
Yep.
With maybe anyone else. who wants
Go to Middletown, or we can go to West Greenwich.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other side of the bay.
Real good view. On the roof protected. Thank you. Otherwise, when I put it up, I was working on it. Valley Road. You know the one I see.
The next presentator is Kearsarge, and I might not have pronounced that correctly, Energy LP. Is it Kearsarge?
Kearsarge, like the mountain in New Hampshire.
Yep.
That's close enough. So, thank you for inviting us in. I think Energy Development Partners gave a great overview of solar, so I don't want to be too redundant. I'm Andrew Bernstein. I'm the founder and managing partner of Kearsarge Energy. We're one of the largest developers in New England. We differ a little bit from Energy Development Partners is that we not only develop, we own the projects. We finance them ourselves, which is really critical because with the unknowns that come up, you can start a project and a year later a program can change and the project can die. So we've done to date about 50 megawatts in Massachusetts. We actually won the program at URI to build the projects, as well as sell them additional because they're so huge that they're buying net metering. But we're also going to sell them some power, and we're building 8.2 megawatts, which is the largest project in the state to date at 3 different Superfund sites. So we've done an array of projects. I think the topography on this project will dramatically change how much you're going to get out of it, because it is a steep slope. Building it will change the cost structure because you probably won't be able to drive pile into it depending on the rocky structure. You might have to do some ballasted as well, which will change the overall structure of the project.
Have you been down this site?
I live a house in Bristol. I've driven by, haven't toured the whole
Okay.
site. We've looked at it online. Henry's done some extensive work, and Henry Barrett, one of my associates on Kearsarge. So we're developing projects all over New England. I think that the incentives, I think one of the things that was said before is critical, that timing is of the essence. We build these projects, if we were awarded this project, we'd have it up and running in 12 months. We don't have to go out for financing, as I said before, because it's our own capital. But I think the challenge is, since we're doing the largest project, is National Grid. That's the issue in terms of the interconnection and working, and they've come up with some new issues more recently on what happens with low voltage and some other things with the state. And National Grid so far has been very favorable. Depending on who you work with, it's a lot more challenging. So what we envisioned in this project, we looked at the numbers and what the town has been buying for energy. So we came up with 3 different components: taxes, lease, as well as the ability to save money by taking some of the power yourself. So you know, I think some of these things definitely get negotiated when you look at the different pieces. But what we solve for is we know how much the returns are going to be out there. So we tend to be really realistic in terms of what the money can be, having financed projects all throughout New England, as well as on the West Coast and Hawaii. So we have a pretty good understanding of what the market's going to pay. And the financing market right now for solar has changed dramatically in the last 3 months. One of the largest players has gone bankrupt and had huge issues throughout the market in financing, which often happens at Sun Edison, because they were using this new type of structure, which had driven prices up. And doing solar is almost like real estate. When there's a gold rush, you run hard and you see what you can get. So it's become dramatically harder to finance projects. So we think it's a great opportunity in Tiverton. I think there's some work. I think you can do this project and nicely tie it, make it an eco park, depending what else you want to do. If you want to do industrial, and we can build per meter. You can do 5 megawatts, so we can do more per parcel. It doesn't have to be limited to 5 megawatts AC. It's just the meter size. So I don't want to be particularly redundant, but I think that the opportunity is to move quickly and make some decisions. I think some of your other questions were good questions about wind. The nice thing about solar is there's no moving parts. You can do tracking systems. The numbers don't work in most of New England. They have some up in Vermont. But I think the important thing is when you're looking at systems like this is there's little disturbance to neighbors. Mm-hmm. There's no noise. You know, when you have the inverters at night, they're not working because there's no sun. But even during the day, it's like no louder than a refrigerator. And they're pretty common because the transformers are without whenever there is a power station with National Grid or substation. So I think that there's a really nice opportunity for the town. We were modeling numbers when you add in the different components of about, on average, 260,000 a year, depending if you built out the whole. So we sort of do it more looking at in terms of the megawatts, because if you have 4 to 5 acres, it's going to be tight to put 1 megawatt on unless you don't have any trees around, because trees will dramatically. So you're going to have to cut back trees with shading. And it's sort of the secret that people don't come out till you're in the middle of planting, and people don't want to cut down trees. It's sort of counterintuitive. So you could have 1 megawatt on 6 acres, or you could have 1 megawatt and make it tighter. It just depends on what the shading's going to be, and that dramatically affects the output from the array. So most of what Kearsarge has done, we work with all public entities. So we've worked with, I don't know, north of 35 different public entities, from the towns that were mentioned before, in South Kingstown, and Narragansett, and URI. We're looking at some projects with the Airport Commission as well. Different towns, towns on the border, Blackstone, Franklin. We've built projects on abbeys, landfills, Superfund sites, roofs. So we've done the full variety of projects. So that's sort of the highlights on Kearsarge. But I think, for the town, whether you go out to a formal RFP process, or if you're just trying to make a decision, we're seeing more towns now in Rhode Island go out to an RFP, just because of what's happening from a public entity status. There are ways to get around that, but for an unsolicited proposal. But what's happening right now is we're seeing the town sort of say, I want to get the best deal for the town, so I want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples. So they put out an RFP and you respond. So that's what we've seen throughout Rhode Island, as well as throughout most of New England.
Now, how many acres would you be interested in?
Well, it just depends. I mean, it depends what we're looking at right now in some of the pictures that we put out. We're looking at basically potentially up to 15 megawatts. So it could be as high as the 90 acres. It's a little presumptuous for us to say the acreage right now until we do a full topography study. So I think that, once again, as the question was asked before, you can nicely fit it in with the other things you're doing. So it really has to have a whole plan of what you want to do with this industrial park, because once the solar's in, you're not going to want to move it, it's too expensive. As well as the whole infrastructure in terms of the grid. You want to look at if there are any issues with water. One of the other things that's happened recently is the DEP, as well as the EPA, has been looking at the groundwater issues, and that's changed a bit, and it's also changing in Rhode Island too. So these panels, you'd think about that the panels are what's called not impermeable, so as the water comes off them, it won't change the how much water would be coming in a normal storm, but the DEP is now saying that there are, and the EPA as well, that there are some issues with that the rechanneling of the water. So that's caused some other things. So some things are changing right now as this market matures. The other thing that's interesting is that you're seeing some new technology. So you're actually getting more high efficiency panels. So you can do more on less acres again. So we tend not to look at acres. We pay per megawatt, so that if we get more out there, you should get paid more. Our lease is fairly standard because we've done so many of them. 20-year lease, but we have a strong balance sheet, so we stand behind what we're doing, and we're a private company.
So the sheet, Madam President?
Go ahead. No.
The sheet that's in your pamphlet, is that based on 30 acres, 60 acres, 90 acres?
That was based on megawatts. To do 15 megawatts would probably be, depending on the high efficiency panels we used, anywhere from 70 to 85 acres.
70 to 85?
Yep. It depends. I think it'd be really tight to get anything more than that on the acreage, just because of the shading. And I don't want to put out numbers here that I'm going to come back and say, whoops, you know what, you're going to get paid a lesser because we can't get as much in there.
If I was trying to limit my uncertainty, in view of the size of the properties you've been talking about and we've heard earlier, the 30, the 40, the 60, the 90, and again, I know nothing about this subject at all, so this may be a naive question. Is it possible for both to have programs with both companies and to overlap part of the program into Water Authority property? I guess they haven't been introduced to the Water Authority either, but as I'll repeat, they were interested in turbines, why not solar? In view of the size that you're looking for, and I think, Mark, you indicated that you were thinking the best bet for us was something like 45, 50 acres or something like that?
Even less than that, 35,
Okay,
a portion of the
35,
park.
Is that a possibility? That is, two programs, two companies, and being introduced and getting the Water Authority interested? I
Been
just
talked to
throw
them.
it out. I mean,
If I might, I think what might make the most sense is you determine which part of the industrial parcel you'd want solar on, and then with that, solicit bids based on those acreage. And then you could get apples to apples numbers.
I think that's what Mark has done on the map,
Yeah.
is identify exactly where the solar park should go.
And when key areas available for highest and best use.
Yeah. And then do a full topography study.
We have some.
Yeah.
Just one question, Mark, but what you've identified there is open space. That's open space because it's wetlands.
Portion of it, and some of it's dry.
Right, so we're gonna have.
All the dry area,
600%.
obviously, not wetlands.
Yeah, and then you're gonna have the issues with the water. That's why you'd have to do a full study, because the water, so I'm not gonna come up here and say you can do as much on there. You're gonna have issues with water running off, and with the DEP stepping up, and we've done this so many times with so many different towns, that you're gonna have some issues when you go through the Concom as well as the planning board.
Well, also, we abut to wetlands. Most of the Water Authority has, it's wetland, it's not wetlands, it's watershed area for the Stafford
Stafford
Pond.
Pond.
So you're not going to be able to cut down trees in a watershed area.
Correct.
It doesn't make any sense.
You're gonna have a 50 or 100-foot setback,
Right.
so it's gonna
Some
change
of
that.
that is.
Yeah.
So that will change it, and that's why, we had some potential layouts that we put on different areas, but until we finalize, I agree 100%. It's gonna be really hard. So we don't do it by the acreage, we just look at what the megawatts are gonna be, because the megawatts are gonna be driven by the requirements of the land. And also what particular requirements you might have, because I think with future development, there could be some other issues. We did 8.4 megawatts on an abbey in Franklin, Mass. Really smart sisters in the town of Franklin took all the power, but they wanted to protect the critters, and they had some issues with the shading, as well as how to approach their retreat house and all the things like that. So those things do get factored in some point, especially when it's a town, because after 20 years, you want to have a decommissioning reserve. You want to make sure that it's going to be restored to what it was before. So there's different approaches when you want to take a look at these.
Yeah, I'd like to still, based on the size that you're talking about and the size that Mark has talked about, I'd still like to get at least a reaction from the Water District. As I recall, at one point when we were talking to them, and it might have been with the prior town council, they were talking about either 2 to 4 turbines. I don't know what space that takes up, I don't know how much space that
That was
takes
a
up,
while ago.
but at least let them know that we're talking, if nothing else, you know?
It's fine.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at wind. I'm pretty knowledgeable on what happened with Portsmouth. And wind is a really difficult animal in New England. It belongs where it's happening right now, off Block Island. If you don't have the Kennedys blocking it in other areas where you don't have views, where I think it's a great resource, or on ridges. But the challenge when you look at wind is that there's a bunch of issues that can happen in terms of birds flying by, curtailment, noise. So there are some significant issues, and if you're going to do future
Yeah, I was
development,
going
that
to
might change
say,
it.
just to clarify it, I'm not pushing for turbines. I was
Okay.
simply saying that since they were interested in turbines, maybe they'd be interested in the solar system.
Yep.
That's all. I'm not pushing turbines. please.
Okay.
No, the town
Don't
has-
don't write that down in the newspaper.
Well,
Any other questions?
well, just to mention, you know, I'll give you, for instance, I had asked the question already. There are places in this town where, I'll give you, for instance, right where I live on Hancock, we have Tiverton Housing Authority. They got this big, huge field out behind there. They had, by zoning, they had to have enough land because of the number of apartments, so they ended up buying like a whole city block behind them. It's all just land. Would you be able to spread these things around the town so that we had maybe, I don't know, how many panels there that could fit in, and then maybe some at town farms, some over other, some at the schools? I mean, do they all have to be in one area with your company?
They don't. I mean, we're doing a program in Concord, Mass, where we've done the landfill, we're doing a Superfund site, we're doing a number of the municipal buildings throughout the town. The challenge is bringing in we have electrical engineers on staff, and making sure that it's going to work from an interconnection perspective, because what drives these projects is really the interconnection with National Grid and what's the distributed generation on the line. Since there isn't a lot of wind or other renewable assets or solar yet in Rhode Island overall, it's a little bit easier to do, but you have to look at where it is on the line. So I think if you have housing authority and you have some good plots, it makes a heck of a lot of sense to put it there. I mean, you're looking at a commitment, and if you move quickly, you can definitely reap the benefits. I think this program will change dramatically in the next 2 years, based on what happened in Massachusetts, and National Grid is fighting tooth and nail in Massachusetts right now. The incentives have just changed dramatically. Massachusetts was the best state in the country to build solar. So I think that having that in the back of your mind, the question is not to say this is going to be 2 or 3 year development, to say that we're going to bang it out and here's a master plan. Let's make sure we can build, maybe it's 2-3 megawatt facilities, but try to get the benefits now, because National Grid could quickly say the net metering or the net metering program could change dramatically.
Well, we had Ms. Black came in, but I think we had a group, right, that was interested in doing like solar on our schools, and what we had talked about in Middletown. I mean, there's a lot of areas around, even around our schools and things, areas that are kind of buffer zones between the ball fields and the, so that's my only point, because I honestly look at our industrial park, and from what you're looking to build, I think it would be mostly our prime property, the top of the hills, the few areas that are actually developable without, major restorations. And the lands we'd like to see to go in would be the ones that we've marked out that we can't sell because nobody could build there. But I'm starting to believe that you're not going to be able to it might not be feasible for solar panels to get into some of those areas.
Well, that's what you would have to do is,
Right, and we looked at the plans on this. I think you're absolutely right.
I want you to open up your idea to look at the whole town. I don't know if we can provide you with a list of properties we have. I mean, Google map, I mean, you can look at the town by ear and see the areas that we'd be, like the one on Hancock. I mean, that's a huge field. It's never gonna be used probably. They have to cut it and stuff, so it's.
May I, Denise, since he brought my name up? I'm the liaison to the town council from the school committee. We've been looking at this for a long time. We've been going up to the state. looking at all the benefits. Of course, we can't put them on the roofs right now because they can't hold rain, but I do like...
Once we put the new roofs in.
But I do like the idea of the virtual that you talked about, because these 3 schools are neighbors. They actually abut that land, and that would be wonderful benefit to the whole town and the taxpayers if we could somehow get that virtual one is an excellent idea. Thank you, Joe. But we have been looking at this and going up to the state. We were the first town to do solarized, just so you all know. The solarized Rhode Island came from the national, federal government, and we were the first town to do that. So that I couldn't get it because I have dormers, but talking to my husband about over the garage.
So the numbers that we looked at from the town, it's well over 1 million kilowatt hours. I don't have it in front of me right now. So you can virtually net meter, but you can buy it from another facility. It makes the most sense if it's on your land, because you're going to get the double benefits, which we'd put in. You'll get the net metering savings as well as get the lease rate. So, we've seen other towns. One thing is to move as quickly as possible, but we've seen other towns to try to come up with sort of a master plan and say, here's 5 areas. The housing authority, X acres of the industrial park, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come back to me. And we just finished bidding on one in North Brookfield, which did something very similar, and Concord, Mass, and a couple others. So it's an interesting approach.
Just one last question.
Sure.
You said in your presentation here, it said timing is critical, net metering, interconnection, and off-takers. What's off-takers?
Well, you want to make sure the off-takers are the groups that are going to buy the energy, because there's a limited amount of groups that are going to take this, and this could change as well. So these guys have part of URI. We have a fair amount of the URI offtake, which is the largest in the state. But I think they've got some interesting towns. We've got a couple other interesting towns that are stepping up. So you just want to make sure you have off-takers.
Okay.
Because
Thank
you just
you.
don't want to be into these things. The solar industry has been a bit of a gold rush industry. There's a lot of real estate developers who come in and promise, and a lot of projects, majority of the projects never get built for many different reasons. And that's not the situation. One of them could be off-takers, and could be financing. And that's why when we started, we wanted to be a complete A to Z shop. We develop the projects ourselves, we permit, we finance, we own and operate.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else right now?
Just a couple questions, sure. Thanks very much. Just so I understand sort of the scope of what this project would look like, a 15 megawatt, say the best case scenario, you got flat land and all the sun in the world with no shade. What does it cost for you to build something like that?
I think you can look at, there's one cost, which is the cost per watt just for the construction, and then there's the transaction cost. Because what a lot of groups forget if they're not involved in the financing is the tax equity has a cost to it, because you're selling these benefits. So these benefits are quite substantial, and then you have to have the banks that buy them. And US Bank was the largest provider, and we've sold them, I don't know, countless millions of tax credits, and they basically are on hold right now. So the market's changed. So those transaction costs come out on top. But to build them, just pure construction, if it's without any major issues, you can be, North Carolina's $1.50. It could be $1.80 to $2. It's the labor cost, and then you're gonna have the transaction costs on top of it, and you're gonna have the permitting costs. So all in, it could be $250 when you look at all the different costs. Because if I build a 1 megawatt facility, or if I build a 4 megawatt facility, I'm gonna have the same transaction costs for the most part. Lawyers are lawyers. I don't know if anybody on the council's a lawyer, but they're gonna charge the same amount. And it's the same thing for me. And the biggest cost is going out and selling the tax equity. Because
Yeah,
it's such a
what's that
complicated
market
structure.
look like? I mean,
It's
if
a
US
very-
Bank is pulling
It's
back the
It's an
reins. then-
extraordinarily complicated market.
Okay.
I'm dealing with 4 or 5 major groups, insurance companies, banks,
And what are
financing.
they paying for $1 of equity?
You sort of solve, they're good questions, you solve for what their return on investment, what they're gonna look at. They're gonna look at, right now in the market, it's an IRR, internal rate of return, of anywhere after tax of over 20%.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone has looked at their portfolio, but I would take a 20% after-tax return in a second. And it's an immature market in this country. It's very similar to what happened with low-income housing tax credits, the LIHTC, or the historic tax credits. So you have some of the same players involved. But it's changing, and what happened when the largest player pulled out, the smaller projects, it's gotten much more difficult. It's much easier, I should say, to do the residential projects. But the difference is that the incentives in Rhode Island are significantly less than many other states. So it's made it more challenging, and that's why there's not a lot of solar in the state.
And are those credits federal credits only, or are there a state layer as well?
There's basically the federal investment tax credit, and there's the depreciation portion. So the depreciation portion will be used against your state income as well as the federal income.
Okay. So what do those tax credits look like for a project like this? What's the equity that's going to be derived from that? Or you're going to have to place how much?
You're going to look at 30 to 40% of your total capital stack will be tax equity.
So on a project like this, what's that in round numbers?
Why don't we just, the best thing is really to do percentages, but you're looking at big numbers. So you're looking at, let's say you did, I don't know, let's pick a number. Let's say it's 10 megawatts, 25 million. So you're looking at basically about 10 million in tax equity overall you're going to place, because the tax equity has to get a return. But it's a very complicated partnership structure.
That's a lot. Okay. I think that's. Oh, what's the project you did in North Brookfield?
North Brookfield is just an RFP.
Oh.
We've done projects in Hubbardston, Palmer, Barry, Chester, Southwick. We've done the largest SREC 2. There's different incentive programs in Massachusetts. There's SREC 1. The largest you could do is 6 megawatts. We did a 6 megawatt in Chester. We just finished, last year in June, in the SREC 2, a 5 megawatt project in Southwick.
Is the North Brookfield a municipal project?
North Brookfield is a municipal project they put out to bid. And I think that was a total of how many megawatts was that, Henry?
10 or 12 megawatts?
Yeah.
Across 5 or 6 different sites.
But
It's a small town, too.
Yeah, Concord has put them out. So the towns are realizing this is a fantastic way to monetize underutilized land, as you pointed out.
Great. Thank you very much.
How big is the development in Concord?
Concord, we have operating on the landfill, which is a really interesting long story, what I'll bore you with, but it's right next to Walden Woods. And Walden Woods didn't even want solar on their landfill. And they put up money to put a critter bridge across Route 2. That's only for animals, squirrels and deer. That's thanks to Don Henley, who many of us might know, but he raised the money. So that's 1.7 megawatts. We're doing a Superfund site that's going to be 6 megawatts. And then the municipal could be as much as 10 megawatts more. So Concord's different because they're a municipal light department, so they have their own utility.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a different animal. So you don't have net metering apply there, but they have about 100 megawatt annual load. So it's quite a substantial.
Well, there was a reason I asked. I think one concern we have here in Tiverton is to make sure that we keep our small town look. My wife is convinced that Concord is the most beautiful town in the world. So I'm going to bring this story home to her. But just the fact that Concord would have a program like this may suggest the possibility of a program like this.
Yes, have a
Here in
bridge.
Tiverton, perhaps not the most beautiful town in the world, but maybe the second most beautiful town in the world.
And that's not even counting what Concord has done on residential roofs. So, but you still need to be careful. I mean, I'm a proponent, of course, of solar, but you have to be careful to get some of these things permitted. Concord was one of the most difficult towns we've ever worked with.
That's an
because of the
incredi-
reasons you just
Well, I've been
brought
up to Concord. It really is an
Yeah.
attractive, beautiful town.
Yeah, but you want to make sure that anyone who's going to build a project will put in the proper landscaping.
Yeah, that's my
You want to do
point.
site views. You
That's
just
my
don't
point.
want to.
If Concord can take it, Tiverton can take it, I would think. Okay,
Anyone else?
thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much. Now, Matt, from you would like the council to support looking more into the solar energy?
Well, first of all, I hope you feel that you're helped, that you understand the moving parts to a solar transaction like this, and that you're in a better position to evaluate anything that we might eventually come up with. What I am looking for is, fairly concrete direction from the council. Do you want us to spend more time on this? Do you want us to develop an RFP? Do you want us to pick a particular piece of land? Do you want us to take that choice of land to you first, and then develop an RFP against that piece of land? It's very helpful to be directive right now because we're so bombarded with so many different proposals and different things in town.
The only thing I would add to your list is at least mention it to somebody at the Water Authority.
Oh, of course.
Based on the sizes that the Mark has mentioned, especially if we were looking at two proposals, it might be helpful to know one way or the other whether we have any possibility of expanding into the water district with a project like this. So at least let them know that we're thinking about it.
And also, there's a mirror still in this.
Emera's still in the mix.
I would be open to developing, if there can't be the open space, a portion of the industrial park as well for the solar power. I'm not opposed to looking at some of the lots to be used.
Okay, so if I
Do you want to
could,
start with the open space first and have Mark venture into that first? See if that is plausible, even have the companies, see if that would be a plausible
Yeah.
alternative, and then go from there. Does that
I
sound
mean,
good?
I'd also like to look at the industrial park
As a whole?
as a whole.
Yes.
This method of sort of cobbling together various sections and uses without looking at the whole scope of the project.
So what do you suggest?
I guess perfect is the enemy of getting stuff done, I suppose, to paraphrase. But I don't want to end up with us cutting up parts and then say, well, we've left the choicest sections for future development. That never happens because we just cannot figure out a way to position the park strategically enough to benefit from those things, whether it's infrastructure or it's anything.
Well, the
So-
whole park, Brett, as I understand it, is what, 170 acres?
Yeah, 172.
Well, based on the numbers we've just heard, if you had two parties interested, there's your 170.
Yeah, but I also think we have this competing argument that we've heard over and over again, that somehow we can fit every single person who wants to use the industrial park for whatever they want to use it for into the industrial park. At some point, we have to make a decision as to one of these people, one of these users, just, something has to give, and we can't keep dragging our feet for years and years, hoping that somehow the stars align and everybody can sort of fit together perfectly.
So I think direction, though.
I agree with
So-
you.
Yeah.
Look at the stuff that if it's not open space, like Brad's saying, chunks of it or all of it.
Yeah, because I think this is a good starting point, but those parcels to the east of the easternmost green section, is that reserved in theory for a user, or is that just there because that's a portion of the park that's flat?
Yeah, it's not reserved for anybody.
Okay, I want to think about this a little more holistically as to what the park is going to look like, and if we've decided we want a park that's divided by a solar array, does that make sense? Who are the strategic users of that easternmost parcel? Who are the strategic users of the northernmost parcel? You know what I mean?
Well, the mayor is looking for approximately 30 acres for also a solar park.
The mirror is.
with the mayor. And they want to come into the council in June, talk to council like that.
Any chance we can spring for a new map? It takes out some of the old.
Oh, you tell me, Joe, when's FTR?
The budget, John.
But splurge a little bit, maybe try to get something that has current lot.
Here's a thought, let's get some 8.5 by 11 with some tape and tape it all together.
So he's got roads in there, conversation.
All right, so Humira wants, what parcel, do you know where they're interested?
They haven't identified specifically, but the point like over here, we're looking to reserve this, we're gonna use that word for Blue Sphere Corporation, the
That's right.
biogas. It's still near the utility line, so I'd like to keep this in mind for that group.
Yep.
But back in here close to their plant, because they also can rearrange some of the parcels back here and better use of their open space and switching the zoning around. So probably be back in here. Remember.
So this is
For a
exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of conversation we need to have in a real holistic way. That's not, I mean, we're talking about a 170-acre industrial park, land use that will shape the town both financially and physically for the next decades. We got to have this as a serious conversation rather than, I mean, this is a starting off point, and I think it's great. But we got to think about this in a way that puts all the pieces of the pie together, and it isn't just, oh, this portion over here, we're thinking about this thing, and this thing is over here. I mean, if we're going to make decisions, we need to make decisions based on the best information we have, and we got to look at this with, you know,
And you got
some
two-
amount of granularity.
And you have two proposals in front of you. One is for a lease and one is for a buy.
Right.
So, you know. I
No,
think
they're
we
both
got-
for leases.
They're both lease? I
Yeah.
think this gentleman said they
Humira.
purchased.
No, they finance their own.
Oh, they do all their own, I'm
projects.
sorry. They
He's
do
his own
their own
bank.
financing. Okay.
Mark, was Amera to buy the land? Do they want to buy?
No,
the
ground
land?
lease also.
They were gonna lease it to them.
And looking at going on National Grid in July
So,
for their program.
While I've still got you guys here, the ground lease, is that to create sort of a sandwich corporation so you can get a higher price for the credits?
I'm sorry, say it again?
I don't know if I
Ground lease?
can, I don't even know what I said.
About an ice cream sandwich.
Yeah, the ground lease. I mean, it's preferable to have a ground lease because there's a finite time in which you're producing energy, and also, I imagine it gives you a better position for selling the credits.
It doesn't have much of an impact on the credits,
Okay.
but they, you know, like you said, it's a 20-year, 25-year PPA. There's no reason to own the property.
Okay, that's what I figured. All right, thank you.
so the
So-
bottom line is after the 20 years,
It's all land again.
It's all in.
between, it's our land again, and it's returned to its natural
If that's what's in the
stage.
agreement.
That's what
But
we-
between the net metering and the town, the schools, the lease revenue, the tax revenue, that total comes to $5,379,000, and we still own the property.
Yeah, I mean,
But that's the same type of
The
park.
benefit of a long-term lease like this is essentially, it's like a bond, so you get the revenue, but you also still have the capital asset at the end of the term,
Right.
which is helpful if, you know, you've got a property that you don't know in 20 years, it's likely going to be more valuable, or it has a better use, or the town's financial position is different. And you maintain site control over the longer term, and that helps to help people sleep at night, because they don't think that a gigantic, horrible thing is coming in, and there's no way to get rid of it.
I
So
think we
in
got
the
to look
interest-
at, you know, like, I think like Joe said, other parcels,
Yeah.
you know, throughout the town that we could tie into this also.
Well, that's the
So-
idea. I mean, I don't know how many pieces of property the town owns right now, but I'm sure there are properties that we own that have areas, I mean, even like Town Farm, I mean, around the perimeter. I mean, and that's what they did in Middletown, was they used up areas that couldn't be developed. They were the buffer zone between the industrial park and the neighborhood, and it's low impact, there's no, you know, then when they were constructing, there was a little bit of noise, and they cleared a little bit of property. But I'll say again, the only land I see, I'm more convinced now in the industrial park, I think the only land that's really available is the land that's going to be the prime property. And that, you know, if we're going to try to develop that property for a better use, jobs for people in town and tax revenue, then we need to look in other areas.
Well, I have a recommendation in the interest of time. I would respectfully ask that the council direct the administration to provide no later than May 26th, no fewer than 2 options of 35 acres each, anywhere in town, but at least one of those would be in the industrial park, for discussion at that council meeting on the 26th. And depending on the outcome of that discussion, we would then move very quickly, if it's a positive outcome, to an RFP.
Now, how about Blue Sphere? Are they ready for,
Just be careful about your, Tony's not here, but in terms of Open Meetings
All right.
Act.
Yeah, we can't talk about that.
what I do want to say is, maybe by that time or soon after, get some idea of who else is interested.
I think it's fair to say that we have
Well,
a good sense of what, we have information to give you on Blue Sphere
All right,
that's,
and that's what I'm saying, at least in the near future.
So move-
Just tell us who else is interested in what parts of land,
Yeah.
definite.
Yeah, they're moving on a similar track like Emera.
All right. All
Like,
right, so do I have a motion?
Well, I would-
Those conversations need to happen simultaneously. I mean, if you're telling me that you got information on Blue Sphere, but you want me to make a decision on 35 acres of photovoltaic arrays, then which one comes first?
We could maybe just, well, we have to make a decision on something. So,
yeah, I have to say, I chafe a little bit, Councilman Pelletier. I mean, I think you take the opportunity that's in front of you sometimes. We have really a tabula rasa out there right now. It's a clean slate, there's nothing there. Blue Sphere's interest has been expressed in a specific parcel for a specific reason, and that should not stand in the way of this conversation. What I'm hoping we get from this May 26th deadline is clarity on what land truly would be usable for a solar array. Are any of those green areas eligible or not? And if not, which of the remaining better parcels of land is the least desirable and the best place to put solar for us?
And I agree with Brett as far as including the whole industrial park. I mean, if it's got to all go, then let it go.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean,
you're trying
just to push back a little bit, that's, I think we want to maximize the benefits that we can and
Right.
reduce, and with a level of certainty that's reasonable. But if those Blue Sphere portions that they've earmarked are in play, and they're viable for a solar array, and we have people who are interested, and we think that there's a greater possibility of a net positive benefit from using those parcels as solar, then we ought to think about using those parcels for solar and saying, well, I mean, it's been a fun ride, Blue Sphere, but, you know, we don't have the infrastructure, or we don't have what you need, or whatever it is, or the timing is right for us to take this opportunity and maximize the benefits from those parcels.
You know, also in fairness to the presenters, those that are interested, I'd like to get a reasonable, rational timetable. And as you know, one of my constant gripes is the fact that we're simply not competitive in Rhode Island because we have such long, drawn-out affairs with all of these applicants. Give us some sort of timetable, some understanding of what hoops they have to jump through, if necessary.
Okay, so on the
What did I
May
do?
26th meeting, what land is desirable for solar?
Right, so to restate my recommendation, because there's still no motion on the floor, as far as I know,
There's no motion on the floor, correct?
that the administration will be directed to come back to the council at its regularly scheduled business meeting, May 26th,
Guys,
having identified no fewer than 2 parcels of at least 30, 35 acre range, at least one of which must be in the industrial park, to discuss with the council, because we want to pick that piece of land, and then, I thought that was good advice from Kearsarge, and tie the RFP to a specific piece of land, so we're comparing apples to apples.
Yes.
I'll put that in the form of a motion, then. So moved.
Second.
and meanwhile, we'll be working on the other proposals, and somewhere around that date,
I see no reason why we can't have a conversation about Blue Sphere on May 9th,
perfect.
and then additional context for the
That's
26th.
what I'm saying, let's just start doing this quickly.
And I like the at least 35 acres. I think that covers all of my concerns.
Do I have a second? I think I did.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yep.
Okay, so motion's been made and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Do I have a motion? Anything further before I, no. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Mark.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Hey, Sal.